from the rain and the stone, where the wind has no name and the traveler's alone. There's warmth in the fire and truth in the tale of the watcher who walks where the bold-hearted fail. He carries no sword, yet the darkness gives way to the lantern he lifts at the end of the day. He stands on the watchtower, still and unswayed, where the lost find a path through the fog and the fray. Pilgrims Grey, oh steward of the lands, you carry the light in your weather-worn hands. A tale at the hearth, a guide through the night. You open the gate between the wrong and the right.
Pilgrims Grey Chronicles. Welcome, everyone. Robert Clark, your host. I'm going to give an introduction to today's show. That is, sometimes I like to write in a different voicing. I like to write poetically. It's why I like doing music. And I did a concept album, and I'm working on another album that's sort of a concept album. And in this one, I like to use the character that we used on the first album, The Grey Wanderer. So if I occasionally go into some poetic license and read fanciful words rather than your standard, I'm just reporting the news and reading something that's nothing but fact-based, I guess you could go listen to any other show out there that's just going to give you the same old thing, the same old point of view. I like to think that this is one of the few shows out there where I report on serious news, but I also report on the stuff that, serious news people, I guess if you want to call it that, would never cover. They are never going to, well, they're starting to, I guess. I mean, Tucker Carlson has mentioned the Nephilim, but they're never going to take everyday, ordinary news, typically, and relate it back to these powers that are behind humanity, that have been here since we've been here. And so that's what I'll give you here, because I'm not ashamed to talk about it. I'm not embarrassed to talk about it. It has to do with God's word. So why would I be? Right? It doesn't bother me at all. I know I'll probably never be famous as a result, because most people would chalk that up to crazy talk. I don't care. Those same people probably think it's crazy that a man went into the grave after being beaten half to death, tortured, and rejected by his Father in heaven because he was made sin on our behalf, and then rose again on the third day. That's too miraculous for them. But not for me. So, without further ado, we are going to continue now with our series about the interplay between the powers behind the scenes and their organizations and how they work on this earth, and also kind of what we can do about it. One of the things we're doing about it is getting ourselves informed, right? Pilgrims Grey Chronicles, that's what we do here. We walk the long road, the one that Tolkien sings about on The Hobbit, right? The road goes ever, ever on. We walk it. We hang out at the end. We talk on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, and then we go out to our individual watchtowers and let people know what we learn. That's why I have the podcast. I find things out. I read about them. I dig. I'm not satisfied just with surface headline information that we get in the media. I hear things, and then it just makes me look to find out what the real story is. Sometimes it really is the real story. That's pretty rare, right? We all know this. And so I like to get down and dirty and dig, and then sit at the table with you all at the end like we're doing right now as you're listening, talk about it, get back on the road, and go to the watchtower like I said earlier. So that I'm just telling you this now because I got a little bit fanciful with my intro and some of the segues between sections. So at any rate, this one is going to be a show dealing primarily with Masons and some information I gleaned through transcripts, studying, and reading some books by a former member of one of these organizations that we'll get into in a bit. I think you'll find it very interesting. And there's 5 sections with a couple of subsections. Going to take at least an hour, so I hope you brought popcorn or drink or something to nibble on. But let's go. So the world walks past the temples now, blind to the hands that built them. They passed stone thresholds without knowing the oaths that opened them, nor the spirits that dwell in their shadows. I have seen their blue banners in dusty lodges and velvet chambers. I have heard their names spoken only in the dark, and watched men rise by secrets, not by truth. These are not masons of mortar and clay, but priests of the old rebellion, veiled in ritual, bound by blood, building the bones of Mystery Babylon brick by silent brick. That is in the voice of the Grey Wanderer character. That's what I just wanted to let you know. I have not seen their blue banners. I'm just voicing it from his perspective. So 2 weeks ago, we traced the Serpent's Trail from Cain to the Committee of 300, a bloodline that refused repentance, whose children still speak in symbols and sign, whose thrones are carved in compromise, not conviction. And tonight we go deeper, into the lodge, into the craft, into the altar of oaths. What if I told you that the very men shaping our court systems, commanding our armies, and pastoring our pulpits have sworn to protect one another, and even unto death, before ever considering protecting you? And what if I told you that their light does not come from above, but rather from something below that used to be above? It's not a boys' club, like they make it sound. It is no harmless fraternity. It is a spiritual infrastructure designed by the fallen and installed by generations of willing men. Temples of stone, yes, but more dangerously, temples of flesh, because not all temples are made with stone, and not all builders come in peace. That was also part of the Grey Wanderer's voice. So welcome back to the Watchtower. Again, Pilgrims Grey Chronicles, and tonight we shine a lantern upon the Lodge of Shadows. So, in section 1, we'll start with what is their primary foundation here. You could make a case that it goes back before this, but this is the primary, right? Nimrod, the first master builder or first rebel. In Masonic lore, the first Mason is often said to be Nimrod, the same Nimrod of Genesis 10, who built Babel and founded the first flood kingdom. This is not fringe interpretation. It is openly stated in older Masonic documents, such as the York manuscript, circa 926 AD, and reiterated by Schnobelen. I guess that's how you pronounce his name. And that's the gentleman I was referring to in our opening monologue. And I'll get to some of the background behind him in a moment, but let's continue. Genesis 10:10, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. But this isn't some noble forefather of civic architecture. Nimrod was a rebel against the Most High. He wasn't building for God, he was building to replace God. And in the context of the Seed War, Nimrod is the first post-flood human who dares challenge the divine boundary lines, building a tower to reach the heavens, either literally or ritually, and behind him, likely fallen watchers whispering blueprints from their prisons. Or just directly, because not all of them were imprisoned. So according to early Christian writers like Alexander Hislop, in the Two Babylons, Nimrod was deified after death and became the template for Osiris, Tammuz, Baal, and other mystery gods, and the Masons openly tie themselves to this man. And Schnobelen quips, if I were a Mason, I wouldn't be bragging about Nimrod. But they do, because Nimrod's rebellion is their foundation. So how soon after the flood did Nimrod rise? Let's kind of put this in some perspective here. Genesis 8:4 says that the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. Scholars generally date the flood to somewhere around 2300 to 2400 BC using the Masoretic text. At some point in my studio here, I have one of those fold-out, long-form, generational thing that shows the people's names and the dates and the key events from Scripture that happened, and I'm going to put it along the top of my wall behind me, so next time I do a video, you can kind of see it in the background instead of all my guitars and amplifiers in my studio. And I'm thinking about moving one of my Middle Earth posters to the back wall also. It's already on my laptop, so why not? Anyway, so 2300 to 2400 BC, Nimrod is introduced just 2 chapters later in Genesis 10 as the son of Cush and the grandson of Noah. So based on patriarchal lifespans and genealogies, Nimrod's rise likely began within roughly 150 to 200 years after the flood, give or take. And that means by the time Noah's sons were still alive and Shem likely still preaching righteousness, Nimrod was already building Babel and forming the first post-Diluvian kingdom. And where? Where did he do this? Shinar, the plains. The same plains where the Tower of Babel would later be raised to the heavens in open defiance of God, where all the people were gathered instead of filling the earth, right, and subduing it and being good stewards of it. Nope, we all gathered in one spot in direct rebellion under Nimrod. And this timeline proves something kind of chilling. It really didn't take that long, right? The seed of rebellion, once drowned, rose again from the ground, and the sons of the Watchers, though chained, still had voices. So we aren't looking at a slow decline. We're looking at a rapid reformation of evil, a reboot of Genesis 6, using a human king as the bricklayer and the same old spirits as the architects. And sometimes I wonder things like, did Noah live to see Sodom and Gomorrah? Noah was 600 years old when the flood began, according to Genesis 7:6, and he lived roughly another 350 years after the flood, dying at 950 years old, according to Genesis 9:28-29, if you want to look that up. So the flood happened around 23 to 2400 BC. Noah would have died around 1998 to 2020 maybe BC. And if we place the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, let's see, Abraham was born around 2008 BC based on Terah's age in Genesis 11:26, and some adjusted chronology. I can't say that with certainty. So Abraham is likely around 99 to 100 years old when Sodom is destroyed in Genesis 17:24 and 19:1-29. And that places the destruction of Sodom right around, the end of the life of Noah, give or take. So roughly, he might have seen that or heard about it, or he may have already passed away. So it's likely he had already passed, but it's really hard to say. I kind of, in my heart, without proving it, think he was alive and got to see that everything he saw before the flood was happening again. He definitely lived during Nimrod's rebellion. He definitely saw Babel rising in Shinar, and he definitely witnessed the resurgence of fallen religion, and he likely saw early signs of Canaanite depravity emerging in the line of Ham, and he possibly warned people just as he did before the flood. So, let that sink in, right? The very man who walked out of the ark, who had survived the last global judgment of God, was still alive when Nimrod was rising, when Babel was being planned, and when the spiritual infection began again in the land of Canaan. To them, it wasn't ancient history, it was recent memory. And yet the rebellion returned. The Watchers' whispers came back through ritual, through city building, through oath and blood, and Noah, perhaps with tears in his eyes, watched the world slip right back toward the fire. And not just Noah, but God. So from Nimrod's Babylon, a web of mystery religions emerged, tracing the fingerprints of the Grigori, or the fallen watchers, who descended at Mount Hermon, or Hermon. Egypt, we have Osiris, the dismembered king, Isis, the queen of heaven, Horus, the divine child, echoes of Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz under new names. And then Babylon, we have Tammuz worship, condemned by God in Ezekiel 8:14, with women weeping at the temple gate. It had to infuriate God. And then Greece. The Eleusinian mysteries celebrated Demeter and Persephone in secret rituals of death and rebirth, mimicking the Nephilim mythos of returning gods. And the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism introduced in 5th century BC Babylonian exile, often blended with Gnostic cosmology, emanations, light versus dark dualism, the black and white checkerboard design on the floor. And then Gnosticism, a Hellenistic reinterpretation of spiritual hierarchies. The physical world equals bad. Secret gnosis, or knowledge, equals salvation. It replaces God's word with light, received through secret knowledge. That is everywhere today. I always think of Shirley MacLaine, and how everybody used to think she was a fruit cup. But now, hey, we are channeling things from the Galactic Federation these days, and it's every place, right? So why not, right? Anyway, Bill, the former guy with the Masons that we mentioned earlier, who has a strange last name that I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing correctly. He ties it all together as a composite DNA of modern Freemasonry. The lodge doesn't create, it recycles, blending the forbidden knowledge of the Watchers into palatable rituals for elite men. And then we have their technology and builders guilds. First Enoch 8:1. And Azazel, or Azazel, however you want to pronounce it, taught men to make swords and showed them metals of the earth and how they should work gold. Freemasonry, or Freemasons claim to be born from stonemason guilds is kind of both true and deceptive. Medieval operative masons were literal stone builders, cathedrals, castles, etc. But into these guilds filtered speculative masons, wealthy elites, mystics, and philosophers with no skills in stone, but great interest in hidden knowledge. Now, it was here that the watcher tech of architecture, metallurgy, and occult geometries was spiritually repackaged. Cathedrals like Chartres and Notre Dame became stone Bibles, but also veiled occult diagrams, gargoyles, green men, zodiac windows, pentagrams embedded in floor plans. This was not Gothic aesthetics. These were messages to the initiated. The builders rejected the cornerstones but kept the trowel of Enoch, right? That was my little saying there. So Templars, Rosicrucians, Hashashin, the secret lineage. Freemasonry draws its hidden lineage through the Knights Templar, Christian warriors turned bankers accused of worshipping Baphomet, spitting on the cross, and practicing occult rites. Their founder, Hugh de Payenne, is central to Masonic mythology. Hashashin, Middle Eastern assassins, high on hashish, that's where the name comes from, and indoctrinated with initiatory secrets, they practiced blood rites, secret oaths, and political manipulation. And it reminds me of the game Assassin's Creed, for those who've ever played it. Kind of a cool game, but very interesting lore in that game. Rosicrucians, Hermetic Christian mystics who claimed secret lineage to Egypt and Israel. Their symbol, the rose on the cross, appears often in higher Masonic degrees. and the Dionysian artificers, ancient Greek builders who worshipped Dionysus, the god of wine and madness. These builders encoded their gods into temples, just as Masons do today. Every time I think of Dionysus, I think of the game Elder Scrolls and the that mad guy that wanders through that game. He's some crazy person that I think, if I'm not mistaken, talks to inanimate objects and has a pet made of cheese, perhaps. I can't remember. Anyway, it's a very interesting, entertaining portion of the game if you've ever played it. So Schnabelin shows how these bloodline cults merged and passed on their rituals to the Scottish Rite and York Rite degrees of Masonry, and their goal, not brotherhood, but to build a new temple for a new god. The brotherhood is not about equality, it's about loyalty to the throne behind the veil. So in 1717, July 24th, the Grand Lodge of England was officially formed in a tavern, the Apple Tree Tavern. This date isn't arbitrary. 24th lands adjacent to the 23rd and 24th, known in esoteric calendars as a Sirius ritual alignment, where secret societies believe the stargates to the spiritual realm open, connecting this world to higher dimensions. Frankly, from everything I've read, I don't think they're wrong. I just don't think we know anything about it. They do. And I believe much of that is restrained and involves seriously horrible activity and permissions to engage in again. Sirius, the dog star, was worshipped in Egypt and associated with the return of Osiris. They didn't just form a club, they inaugurated a gateway. In fact, it's documented that the Order of the Illuminati, founded by Adam Weishaupt in 1776, quickly merged into the Masonic structure. Schnabelin confirms that by the end of the 1700s, Freemasonry and Illuminism were nearly indistinguishable. And this wasn't about morality, philanthropy, or men's fellowship. It was the installation of a spiritual operating system, a new Babel made not of bricks, but oaths, light, and ritual. So just as Cain built the first city after Eden and Nimrod raised the first tower after the flood, so too do the Masons claim to be builders of a new world, Novus Ordo Seclorum, but one without God's foundation. The names may change, Nimrod, Hiram-Abif, Osiris, Tubal-Cain, but the blueprints remain the same. Freemasonry is the Watcher's master stroke, a covenant-based infrastructure that spans courts, corporations, kingdoms, and churches. A secret religion for a secret kingdom, preparing a throne for a secret king. And so let's move into section 2, discussing some of their signs and oaths, and the gospel of Luciferian light. From Bill Schobel, quote, "Let there be light, but it's not the light of Christ, it is the light of Lucifer." So the oaths. A covenant of silence sealed by blood. Schnabelin, and it's such a difficult name to say with my mouth. Anyway, he doesn't mince words. The initiation rituals in Freemasonry are deadly serious. And while many modern Masons claim the oaths are merely symbolic, the penalties for breaking them are grotesquely violent and historically not just a metaphor. Initiates swear at various degrees that their throat will be slit from ear to ear, their tongue torn out by the roots, their heart torn from their chest, their body disemboweled and burned, and that their remains will be scattered to the four winds of heaven. Schnabelin emphasizes these oaths are not just shocking, they are spiritual contracts. You're entering a binding agreement with spiritual entities to protect the secrets of the craft. The third degree death of Hiram-Abif, the martyred architect, is reenacted in ritual as the aspirant is symbolically killed and raised. But the source of that resurrection is not Jesus Christ. It is the light of the lodge. According to Schnabelin, all Masonic lodges are built to face the east because that's where the sun rises. And that detail is no accident. In fact, it's a deliberate echo of ancient sun worship condemned throughout Scripture. Again, Ezekiel 8:16, they worshipped the sun toward the east. Pagan temples in Babylon, Egypt, and Greece were all oriented to the rising sun, symbolizing the return of Osiris or Apollo. In Freemasonry, the worshipful master sits in the east in the place of divine light. Candidates must face east when taking their oaths. The sun becomes a stand-in for divine enlightenment, drawing from Luciferian Gnostic roots. Schnoebelen warns this is not metaphor, it's rehearsed idolatry. Quote, they are taught to revere the light, but it is not the light of the world. It's the false light that fell from heaven. So let there be light, right? But whose? Whose light? Upon initiation, the blindfolded candidate is led to the altar and asked, what do you most desire? The candidate replies, light. The worshipful master then says, let there be light. And at that moment, a clap is sounded, and the blindfold is removed. The candidate is enlightened, but not by God. Schnoebelen explains that this moment deliberately mimics the creative command of God in Genesis 1, but inverts it. This is the counterfeit Genesis. They claim to give light, but it's the light of Lucifer, the light that deceives. This is what Albert Pike, one of the most revered figures in Freemasonry, wrote in Morals and Dogma. Quote, Lucifer, the light bearer, strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness. Pike admits the secret. Quote, yes, Lucifer is God, but only to the enlightened. Unquote. Freemasonry is a religion of the body. Each degree teaches new hand signs, foot positions, grips, and gestures. For example, heel to follow of the foot, to the hollow of the foot. Stance to signal Masonic standing. Secret handshakes for each degree, known as grips. Due guard, signs using the arms or legs to signal rank to judges or officers. Saying, I hail and conceal, or I conceal and never reveal, as part of sacred code phrases. Those aren't cute customs, they are sacred symbols intentionally mimicking the tokens found in occult initiations and Kabbalistic gesture magic. So judges, police, politicians, all trained in these signs can recognize one another silently and offer special treatment, legal protection, or assistance, and this is why many courtrooms are set up in a way that mirrors lodge architecture. Even the U.S. Supreme Court has Masonic imagery embedded in it. Masonry is Luciferian at its core, but 95% of Masons have no idea, according to Schnoebelen. Only at the 32nd and 33rd degrees, or within the Shinar and Royal Ark rites, are initiates given the full theology. And that is, Lucifer is the god of light, the angel of freedom, the teacher of secrets. 2. Jehovah is portrayed as the lesser, jealous god who tried to suppress knowledge. 3. Salvation comes not through grace, but through ascending degrees of knowledge, mastering rituals, and achieving illumination. This is Gnosticism repackaged, a theology that directly inverts Genesis. Eve didn't fall, she evolved by taking the fruit of knowledge. Lucifer didn't sin, he liberated mankind, right? Some liberation though, right? Are you enjoying your liberation? Yeah. So really, what we see here is the reinstallation of Eden's deception, right? You will be as gods. Freemasonry offers a false gospel, a light that blinds, a ritual that condemns, a brotherhood that betrays. It is a church without Christ, a temple without truth, a kingdom whose God fell from the sky. As Schnoebelen says, this isn't a fraternal order, it's a Luciferian religion, and most of its followers don't even know it. They say that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I don't necessarily agree with that, but we will provide some of it. Who is Bill Schnoebelen, and how did he know about these things? I figured at some point somebody might ask that, and I didn't want to lead off with it, though, because this is a common video trick or podcast trick to get people to listen longer, right? Not only am I going to be giving a rundown on who Bill is, but I'm also going to be going over some of the Fallen Watchers' names and how they're involved. So please do stay tuned and support us by doing so. It really does, believe it or not, listening all the way through greatly helps the podcast. And I have this feeling that we're being throttled to some degree because of some videos like the USS Liberty and so on. So our reach has been squelched, so to speak. You know, I'm not getting views in the thousands at the moment, only barely 100 or so. So anything you can do to help is great. So who is this Bill, and how did he know? Bill Schnoebelen isn't speculating from the outside. He is a former high-level insider who was a Master Mason, Blue Lodge, 3rd degree, advanced through both the York Rite and Scottish Rite. He was a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason. He was a Shriner, known for post-32nd degree mystic rites. He served as Associate Patron in the Eastern Star, a women's auxiliary open to high-level male Masons. He was a former witch, druid, Rosicrucian, and Satanist, fully immersed in the spiritual dimensions behind these rites. He later converted to Christianity and publicly exposed Masonic and occult structures through the Prophecy Club in his book, Masonry Beyond the Light, which, if I can find it, I will put in the tag stuff under the description so you can look at those products and get that book if you want to read it and inform yourself. These are some of the things I used as source materials for this, and they are fascinating. If you want to know your enemy and know what they're up to, this is a good read. Anything I tag is going to be worth reading for you, trust me. I wouldn't waste your time or mine reading something that was garbage. So Bill Schnoebelen says, I wasn't reading conspiracy blogs. I was literally in the lodge, taking the oaths, acting out the rituals, and being groomed for higher spiritual power. And so are the blood oaths real? Yes, and they're published. The exact oaths that Schnoebelen recites are not secret anymore. They're found in publicly available Masonic monitors and ritual books, including Duncan's Masonic Ritual and Monitor, 1866. It's one of the most cited Masonic ritual books, reprinted and available for purchase. It's out there. Richardson's Monitor of Freemasonry, written in 1860. It contains the Entered Apprentice, Fellowcraft, and Master Mason degree rituals verbatim. The Kentucky Monitor, Henry Purtle, 1904, officially sanctioned by Grand Lodges for internal Masonic education. Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike, the spiritual textbook of the Scottish Rite, especially degree 4 through 32, which openly discusses Luciferian light and esoteric doctrine. You can even find PDFs of these works online. Most of the oaths, signs, grips, and due guards are not even secret anymore. What remains secret is why they still require them and what spiritual power they invoke, because most people don't take that seriously. Most people, or a lot of people, don't even believe in God, let alone the spirits behind these lodges. So, don't take my word for it. Read their own. An example oath from the Entered Apprentice degree, as recorded in Duncan's Monitor, says, quote, binding myself under no less a penalty than that of having my throat cut across, my tongue torn out by its roots, and buried in the rough sands of the sea. How lovely. Doesn't Scripture say don't take oaths? Pretty sure it does. And in fact, in past videos, I've explained what a bad idea that is and how serious God takes those oaths. And the enemy knows this. In extra-biblical literature, there is a discussion of Lucifer and I can't remember what other archangel arguing over the body of Moses because of what Moses would have learned in the Egyptian courts and possible oaths taken. So, from the Master Mason degree, quote, to have my body severed in twain, my bowels taken out, and burned to ashes, the ashes scattered to the four winds of heaven, and all of it sealed with, so help me God. So if you're a skeptic, great, you should be. But now you know these aren't just allegations. They are printed, archived, and sworn by men in public buildings everywhere, all over the world. In a quote from the Grey Wanderer, they've hidden these rights in plain sight, betting that no one would read them, and that those who did would be too afraid to speak. But we read them, and we're speaking. Right? No spirit of fear here. So according to an anonymous 33rd degree Mason recorded by Schnabelen, the deeper you go, the fewer brothers you find, and the more spirits you encounter. Now that's creepy, isn't it? The average Freemason never ascends beyond the 3rd degree. The vast majority don't. Of the Blue Lodge, but among the elite, the Scottish Rite's 33rd degree is the inner sanctum, a spiritual threshold. According to Schnabelen, you don't apply to become a 33rd, you're chosen. This honorary, quote-unquote, degree is anything but symbolic. The 33 vertebrae of the human spine are symbolic of the Kundalini spirit ascending, mirroring Lucifer's journey up the tree of knowledge. The Scottish Rite crest used for the 33rd degree is the double-headed eagle, originally adopted from the Byzantine imperial seal, representing dual rule over heaven and earth. Many rituals reference Lucifer as the bringer of light, just as Isaiah 14, verses 13 and 14 describe the one who said, I will ascend into heaven, and I will be like the Most High. So Schnabelen explains that the 33rd degree ritual involves a formal rejection of Christ as unique Savior, replacing him with the light of reason, enlightenment, and divine man. This is Genesis 6 theology reborn. You will be as gods. And that's why we went over some of that in our Cain to the Committee of 300, right? Many Christian leaders take this oath, and most of them promote ecumenicism, where we all just agree to agree, all paths lead to God and an enlightenment and reason and divine. Yep. And what about the Shriner Order? After reaching the 32nd degree, Scottish Rite Masons may join the ancient Arabic order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine, aka the Shriners. Its symbolism is no accident. The scimitar is an Islamic sword of judgment. Holy cow tongue. Wait one moment. My tongue was really dry, and it is not wanting to cooperate. So the crescent moon is linked to Sin, the Mesopotamian moon god. The star with a crescent, Ishtar or Venus, goddess of war and fertility. And the central figure, Osiris or Nimrod, under a veil of fraternity. So the Shriner initiation oath, as recorded by whistleblowers, includes the line, quote, I do hereby, upon the Bible and the mysterious legend of the Quran, and its characters of Allah, Muhammad, and the creed of Islam. Yes, that's right, they swear on the Quran, not the Bible, and to Allah, not Yahweh. That is why you see these movements. Oh, we worship the same God. as the Muslims. We're all just the same. We are not. Not even close. Don't fall for that. Schnoebelen calls this a bait-and-switch ritual. The candidate thinks he's in a Christian-compatible fraternity, only to find himself swearing loyalty to foreign gods and pagan constructs. One of the oldest and most obscure symbols in Freemasonry is the name Tubal-Cain. The phrase appears in Masonic cipher and tracing boards at surface level. Tubal-Cain is found in Genesis 4:22, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. He is a descendant of Cain, known for metallurgy. But Tubal-Cain represents more than a smith. He's the first alchemist, the first to master fire and reshape creation. Some esoteric texts link him to the Watcher Azazel, who taught men weapon making in 1 Enoch 8:1. And he is often called the son of the forge, symbolizing transformation by forbidden knowledge. According to Schnoebelen, to whisper Tubal-Cain in ritual is to identify yourself as one of the initiated, a keeper of the flame of Cain. Not allegory, but rather bloodline code. So no Masonic symbol, of course, is more infamous than Baphomet, popularized by Eliphas Levi and adopted by the Knights Templar, many of those whose rituals were later embedded in Freemasonry. According to Schnoebelen, Baphomet is not just a goat, he's a blueprint. Some of Baphomet's traits, male and female, symbolic of the alchemical divine hermaphrodite. The goat of Mendes, associated with Pan, the nature spirit of lust and chaos, as above, so below, written in Latin on his arms, denoting cosmic inversion, and the flame on the forehead, the third eye of illumination. Baphomet is the god of contradiction, and he is central to the secret theology of high-level masonry. For example, gender fluidity, reflecting the new modern push for transhuman identity. Inversion, the Luciferian hallmark of turning God's design upside down. You find it everywhere in modern times here. In music, in our entertainment. And if you haven't noticed gender fluidity being rampant in our culture, then you've been in a cave. It is everywhere, thus showing the influence. And they're winning, not us. They are winning. So when you see the push for transgender ideology, self-deification, and spiritual fluidity, understand that Baphomet walked there first. You're seeing the influence of a spirit that you can't see with your eyes, but he is there, influencing the culture through his human adherents and avatars. So these rituals, at their deepest level, are spiritual mutations transforming man into something unrecognizable, which is their game, right? They don't want us human anymore. They want our birthright, this planet, or Earth, sorry. The indoctrination is so heavy with all that I still find myself using terms from it. Anyway, and then we have the influence of the Grigori, the builders that never died, right? In the words of the Grey Wanderer, behind every ritual is a voice, and those voices are old. The Book of Enoch speaks of the Grigori, the Watchers who descended on Mount Hermon and taught men forbidden knowledge. Many names in Masonry and occult brotherhoods trace back to these Watchers. Azazel, weapons, makeup, corruption of women. Semyaza led the pact of 200 angels. Amezrak taught enchantments and root cutting. Armoros taught spell release and breaking of bondage. Schnoebelen and other researchers believe that these beings never stopped working. They simply moved underground, embedding their influence in the Rosicrucians, Templars, the Royal Archmasonry, the Golden Dawn, the Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO, The Grigori did not vanish. They just got better at writing bylaws and getting men to swear oaths. So the Sea War, again, never ended. It went underground. The Lodge is the new altar. The oaths are the new covenants. The symbols are the new Tower of Babel, not just raised with bricks, but with rituals, degrees, and deception. And the Grigori still teach, the Canaanites still build, and the fire still climbs the spine of those seeking forbidden light. But we are not conspiracy theorists. We are historians of their rebellion here at Pilgrims Grey Chronicles. And again, in the words of the Grey Wanderer, they do not die as men die, and they do not build as men build, but through flesh they walk. So who are the Grigori? The word Grigori, Greek egregorio, watchers, appear in 1st Enoch, referring to a group of 200 high-ranking angels who descend onto Mount Hermon in the days of Jared, Genesis 5:18. Their pact: let us choose us wives from the daughters of men and beget us children, in 1 Enoch 6:2. This was a direct breach of God's created order, a celestial rebellion that led to the birth of the Nephilim, the giants and hybrid rulers of the ancient world. From Enoch, 1 Enoch 8, here are some of the key watchers and the forbidden knowledge that they gave humanity. Again, Azazel, weaponry, cosmetics, jewelry, material and sexual corruption. Probably one of the first progenitors of pornography, written or even visual. So if you don't want to be doing their bidding, stop looking at pornography and involving yourself in it. It is not healthy. And then we have Semyaza, enchantments, root cutting, founder of the pact. Barakel, astrology and signs of the stars. And then Benamu, writing, ink, paper, language, magic. Spelling bee, spelling. If you know, you know, right? Casdasia, taught curses, abortion, disease-related knowledge. Excuse me. My voice is very hoarse from weed whacking earlier, breathing in all that yucky pollen. Amezerek taught sorcery, herb lore, and spellcrafting, or what some might even call pharmakia. Amoros, resolving enchantments, unbinding spirits. Kokobel, constellations and celestial charts. Sariel, lunar cycles and signs. Each watcher was a founding father of a mystery school whose secrets were later embedded into Egyptian priesthoods, with Thoth and Osiris cults, Babylonian astrology and temple rites, Greek Eleusinian mysteries, Gnostic initiations, Kabbalistic esoterica, Templar and Masonic systems. These were not evolved human ideas, they were installations from celestial outlaws. And they still do it. Are they just spirits or can they appear human? I think so. Scripture says so. Genesis 18:2-8. 3 men appeared to Abraham. He feeds them. One is the Lord of hosts, the Lord of spirits. The other 2 are angels who later visit Lot in Genesis 19. They sit, they walk, they speak, and eat like humans. The Sodomites recognize them as men and attempt to rape them. These weren't visions, they were fully embodied spiritual beings. And I personally think that the Sodomites also knew they were angels. I think they were already breeding with rebellious angels again. In Daniel 10:13, the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael came to help me. If you remember that story. And as a result of that, we learn that princes over nations are not necessarily just the human king, but territorial spirits. They can engage in direct spiritual warfare over geopolitical affairs. They aren't just demons, they are celestial beings in real conflict with each other. And we feel the outcome of it here, even if we don't see it and perceive it with our eyes. Now, how do they still operate? Well, through bloodlines and avatars, right? Even after their judgment, in 1 Enoch 10, where the Watchers are bound in the abyss, their influence continues. Well, how? Well, one, they trained humans to continue their system, right? The early post-flood priests of Egypt, Sumer, and Canaan reenacted their rituals, passing on the knowledge through initiation and bloodline. Number two, they left behind Nephilim offspring. These giants or hybrid kings became rulers. Og, the Anakim, the Amorites, and later genetic lines resurfacing in pharaoh cults, Babylonian priesthoods, Roman Caesars, illuminated bloodlines of Europe. And of course, they can avatar through willing host, right? Just as Satan entered Judas, Luke 22:3, so too do fallen beings inhabit or control humans, particularly those who take these oaths, submit to the rituals, or open gateways, like we mentioned earlier, through occult practice. This is how spirit-controlled systems like Freemasonry function. The lodge becomes a ritual gate, and the initiate becomes the vessel. Schnabelin notes, quote, "These spirits don't possess like demons. They guide, they impress, they inspire until the man no longer knows where he ends and the spirit begins." Did you catch that? Remember the stories of the Muse in Greek mythology? So, examples of human watchers influencing today. We have a few examples that echo watcher-human interaction. You have Jack Parsons, right? Jet propulsion lab guy for NASA. He performed a Babylon working ritual to summon Thelemic goddess, and claimed direct inspiration from angelic beings. Aleister Crowley channeled Aiwass, who gave him the Book of the Law. The being claimed to be a Watcher-class spirit from Sirius. Now, I read that when I was in community college for a philosophy class and did a study on it. And it's some really crazy stuff. Like even training you to do things like read everything backwards. And when I first read it, I thought that's just the silliest thing ever. But now I get it. It's to train your mind to reverse everything that is good and flip it on its head and to balance things and to do as thou wilt. And then we have Joseph Smith, Mormonism. He received temple architecture and rites nearly identical to Freemasonry from the angel Moroni. Right? And then we have Elon Musk's AI ambitions. Public statements like, with Neuralink, we can achieve symbiosis with the machine mind. Eerily echo the Watcher goal of re-engineering humanity. You won't be human anymore when you take that, by the way. So don't do it. These aren't anomalies, they are signs. Signs that the old architects still speak through the mouths of powerful men. And they are influential. They won't sell it this way. It will not be obvious to you. It will be more like, oh, well, Neuralink will help this person walk again. It'll help the blind to see. It will do this. It will do that. But it'll also do other things. Are you willing to make that trade-off? I'll just suffer and be what God intended for me to be. So, the last thing I would do is put something in my head under the guise of, oh, it's for the betterment of humanity and it'll aid in all these things. Crippled people will walk again. Quadriplegics will have use of their limbs. Yeah, but you'll also control their mind if you want to, because you have a chip in their head and can erase their free will at any moment. and connect them to a hive mind, a false Holy Spirit. So, they left the heights of heaven for the daughters of men, folks, and now they dwell in temples of flesh, signing leases in blood. Not all angels fell into the pit, and some fell into history and learned to wear suits. And it's not mythology, it is seed war strategy. And the builders of the lodge are still building with your leaders, your systems, and your silence. But some say, oh no, they're all locked up. They were all locked up. Well, in 1 Enoch 10, 11, 13 through 13, God commands the archangels to bind the ringleaders of the rebellion. The ringleaders. Bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness, cover his face that he may not see light, and cover him with rough and jagged rocks. To Gabriel, go to the bastards and the reprobates, destroy the children of the watchers, and bind them for 70 generations. Pretty strong language, but it's targeted, not universal. The judgment is clearly aimed at the leadership, Azazel, Semyaza, the chiefs of the 200 watchers. But it does not explicitly say all 200 were bound. In fact, the phrase bind the ones who showed men unrighteousness may suggest only a subset were locked up, those who crossed certain moral lines the most flagrantly. And then in Peter and Jude, they confirm the binding, but not for all. 2 Peter 2:4, God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to Tartarus. Jude 1:6, the angels who kept not their first estate, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness. So these New Testament passages affirm some angels, clearly referring to the watchers, were bound, but again, they don't specify how many. They don't say all spiritual rebels were locked up. They focus on the worst offenders, likely those who physically mated with women. And maybe not all of them did. But they were still all involved in genetically manipulating the creation and rewriting God's language and rewriting his code in their image, rewriting everything in there, including humanity. So what evidence do we see that they weren't bound, some of them? We still see spiritual beings acting very freely in Scripture after the flood and after Babel, like the Prince of Persia in Daniel 10, right? A prince over Persia resists the Archangel Gabriel for 21 days. It's not a demon. It's a territorial angelic being with power over nations. Demons are just the spiritual, the false spirit that dwelt in the flesh of the Nephilim, and they still roam the earth. And in fact, in some extra biblical literature, it says that only 10% were allowed to still roam on the earth. The other 90% were locked up. I mean, take that for what it's worth. It seems like more and more are present in our generation. So it may be that the 10% from the flood were locked up, but there were more made, right, after the flood. So pretty clearly shows that spiritual rulers were remaining active long after the supposed watcher binding. And then we have, Satan himself. If God bound every rebellious angel after Genesis 6, then how do we see Satan roaming in Job 1 and 2? Unless that took place prior to the flood, But then we have him tempting Jesus in Matthew 4 and operating through Judas in Luke 22. So it seems that some rebels were judged early, others were left to continue their campaign. So many early church fathers believed that the worst watchers were imprisoned, especially those responsible for the Nephilim, but lesser rebels, or those who joined the rebellion later perhaps, still operate today, and their judgment is coming. Some even suggest unbound watchers helped rebuild Babylon, Egypt, and Rome post-flood. Maybe they were the Veracochus. Who knows? Scholars like Michael Heiser, Derek Gilbert, and even earlier thinkers like Tertullian and Justin Martyr saw a divided hierarchy among fallen angels. Some imprisoned in Tartarus, some roaming like the Prince of Persia, Satan, and some working through human empires. So what about now? Well, if you're looking at today's world, we have child sacrifice, inverted rituals, media possession, esoteric architecture, hybrid experimentation, gender inversion. You're not seeing the absence of watchers. You're seeing their ongoing strategy through rituals they designed, through bloodlines they engineered, through institutions they infiltrated and in some cases built, and through humans they still avatar or inspire. So some were buried in chains, some were buried in books, some were buried in bloodlines, but the structure they began to build is still being built. And the sons of men now finish what the watchers began with their help. And you're right to trust your discernment. Not all of them are gone, and not all of them look inhuman. In fact, my guess is you couldn't distinguish them from a normal human. So many names were syncretized, meaning one being was worshipped under different names in different cultures. For an example, or a comparative breakdown from some of these, the original Book of Enoch Hebrew, and then meaning and role, and then later name variants. We have Semyaza, Shemyaza, Samyaza, and its meaning is seize the name, and the role was to be chief of the 200 watchers. We have later name variants like Shamsiel, Samael, sometimes linked to Zeus, El, or even Saturn or Kronos. And then Azazel, which means scapegoat. His role was making weapons, warfare, jewelry, makeup, like we mentioned. His later name variants, Set in Egypt, Prometheus in Greek, Mars, Ares, Pan, Loki. He's like the trickster archetype. Barakel means lightning of God, involved with astrology. His later name variants were Baal, Bel, Marduk, sometimes linked to Lucifer by misidentification. And then we have Kokabel, the star of God, in charge of constellations and signs, or the teachings of it. Also known as Mercury, Hermes, Anki, and possibly Eosophoros, or Venus in Greek. And then we have Penemu, inside or / pinned, teacher of secret wisdom and writing. In Egypt, he was known as Thoth. Babylon is Nabu, and Cadmus and Onus. And Sarael, God is my prince, teacher of lunar cycles, known also as Sin, the moon god, or Khonsu or Selene, female form. These angels, I believe, can take any form they want, male or female. Most choose male. And then Amaros, the cursed one, teaches dispelling and enchantments. Possibly, I've read some connections to Hades, Anubis, and Dispater. And then Amazirach, root cuttings and sorcery, pharmacology, also known as Asclepius, Hermes Trismegistus, the guy that, allegedly had the emerald tablets written down, and also known as various Melchizedek imposters. And then we have Satanel and Mastema, the accuser, later an adversarial figure, also known as Satan, Lucifer, Helael, Shaitan, Iblis, Ahriman, and Hades. That's not written in stone. That's just what I look through. Some people would probably agree or disagree on some of the connections there, but, the main thrust of the idea is that they were known by various names in various cultures. But there's still many of them. It's not like those are just the only ones. There's many of them out there, right? So Just know that they go by different names. They like to play different roles. Kind of makes me think of Tyler Hansen and how he shows the different roles that our favorite celebrities like to play, more multiple roles, which makes you wonder, doesn't it? Are they really human? Who knows? So this is where it gets kind of interesting. Shimiyaza or Semyaza, explicitly called the chief of the 200 Watchers in 1 Enoch 6:3. His sin, leading other angels to take human wives and teach forbidden arts. Many ancient occult systems revered Semyaza as the initiator of sacred mystery wisdom, and some scholars believe he was originally ranked above Lucifer in the heavenly hierarchy before both rebelled differently. Lucifer, or Hallel, mentioned in Isaiah 14:12, where it says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Hallel, son of the morning?" Now that was interpreted in Latin as Lucifer, the light bearer, not a name, but a title. It may not be the same being as Shimiyaza, but a separate rebellion focused on pride and self-deification rather than Nephilim hybridization. So the important distinction, Lucifer Hallel seems to have led a heavenly rebellion against God's throne, Isaiah 14 and Revelation 12, whereas Shimiyaza seems to have led an earthly rebellion through the seed war, Genesis 6 and Enoch 6-9. Just different battlefronts in their warfare, right? I'm sure they may have worked together, but had different roles, right? And the other ones might have had their own roles, right? If you look at Lucifer or Hallel, through the ages, he's often conflated with other gods, right? In Babylon, Bel, Marduk, known as the light bringer, storm god, false messiah. In Canaan, he was known as Baal Zephon, sky lord, usurper of El. In Greece, known as Zeus, the king of gods, lightning wielder. Even Jesus mentions that correlation there in Revelation. In Rome, we have Jupiter, Lord of thunder and law. The Gnostics referred to him as Sophia's demiurge, a false god of material world. Egypt, Ra, merged with Set, light in chaos and balance. Occultism, Lucifer, Prometheus, Phosphoros, light bringer, fire thief. Stole God's knowledge and gave it to men so that we could be enlightened. And we're so enlightened now, aren't we? Everything's so much better since this happened, right? Since Adam and Eve, took the stolen fire and light. It's almost as if God knew what he was doing by not, wanting us to do this. So these variations serve to blur the line between Shimiyaza, Lucifer, and other rebellious celestials. Probably a tactic of confusion that protects their hierarchy, right? I don't know. That's a speculation. So this morphing of names and identities serves several purposes. Obfuscation, the names are scrambled to keep the full picture hidden from the common man. Localization, each culture could own a god, even if it was the same fallen being in disguise. And then legacy protection. If one name becomes evil, well, the same being continues under another banner, right? Because very often they don't want to be seen as evil. They want to be ancient wisdom beings and bringers of light and wisdom and knowledge, right? Light bearers. Just like modern Freemasonry rebrands old Babylonian rites with new euphemisms like the Great Architect, these beings simply shift symbols and languages, but the spirit behind the mask remains unchanged, and that's what's important. Semyaza fell to mingle with flesh. Hallel fell to claim a throne, right? One led angels down, one tried to ascend up. Their paths crossed in Babel and still cross today in every nation, lodge, and temple. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're asking, was Lucifer or Hallel the same as Semyaza? No, I don't think so. They're not the same entity. In the biblical or Enochian record, Lucifer Hillel bin Sakar, the shining one of the dawn, is found only in Isaiah 14:12, describing the fall of a king of Babylon in a prophetic taunt. And while Christians often equate this with Satan, scholars like Heiser and Gilbert caution that this text does not directly refer to the Genesis 6 rebellion. Semyaza, or Shemiyaza, is the chief of the 200 watchers in 1 Enoch 6-10, who descended to Mount Hermon, took wives with those who took the oath with him, and taught forbidden knowledge, and he leads the rebellion that causes the Nephilim hybrid crisis in Genesis 6, ultimately leading up into a massive reset of God's entire creation. Because they were reframing it. They were, to quote a modern term, because this is what they do, right? Building back better is what they were doing. They were making Genesis great again, building back better. So, thought you might find that interesting. It seems as if to me, Lucifer is mentioned in Isaiah 14, associated with pride and desire to ascend into heaven. Not mentioned really in Enoch, possibly the same as Satan, linked to Babel by prophetic type. Whereas Semyaza, mentioned in Enoch 6-9, is associating with corrupting humanity via physical union. Never called Lucifer in any text I know of, and possibly subordinate or a parallel rebel linked to Babel by bloodline and ritual legacy. So in summary, Lucifer seems to have targeted God's throne. Semyaza targeted God's image, man. They serve the same rebellion, but operate basically through different mechanisms. And obviously, different cultures probably confuse their identities, right? For instance, Zeus, Baal, Marduk, and Jupiter are often composite gods merging traits of Hillel, Semyaza, and even Azazel. Derek Gilbert and Sharon Gilbert both point out in Veneration in Giants, Gods and Dragons, that Zeus is likely Baal, or Enlil, a usurper of the Most High's identity. These fallen powers blur their distinct histories and paganisms to stay hidden in the open. So Derek identifies Shemiyaza as a distinct figure who corrupted humanity through secret knowledge and notes his connection to Babel, Hermon, and Templar rites. See The Last Clash of the Titans, Giants, Gods, and Dragons if you want a good read. I can't think of a single book that Derek Gilbert has written that is not good. You will benefit yourself greatly by reading pretty much everything he writes. And he points out that Lucifer is a Latin translation, not a proper name, and the Hillel passage in Isaiah is more about cosmic rebellion and throne usurpation than direct Nephilim creation. So the connection to Freemasonry lies in the preservation of Watcher knowledge, not necessarily Lucifer worship alone, though Luciferian light is embraced in higher degrees. So, Semyaza was the chief of the 200 Grigori who descended on Mount Hermon and brought about the Genesis 6 crisis. He is not the same being as Lucifer, whose fall is described in Isaiah 14, a cosmic rebellion tied to pride and self-deification. However, both work to the same goal, to displace God, corrupt creation, and establish dominion over mankind. Their legacies overlap in the mystery religions, secret society, and esoteric systems that we see today, and the confusion between them is intentional, woven into history and myth to mask their true identities. So Semyaza fell into women, Hillel fell into pride. One sired giants, the other plotted thrones. Together, they laid the foundation for the temple of men and the palaces of gods. So, that brings us to how does this operate in the real world, right? The builders of the modern world, from lodge to law, from ritual to rule. Well, the key idea is the Freemasonic system seeded by the Watchers and refined through mystery religions has now matured into a global framework of influence, political, economic, educational, and spiritual. Lodges built nations, right? The founding of America was deeply Masonic. George Washington, a 33rd degree Mason, laid the Capitol cornerstone with Masonic rites. District of Columbia's layout mimics Masonic compass and square geometry. Symbols such as the all-seeing eye, pyramids, and eagle-phoenix duality are steeped in esoteric meanings. The founding fathers, like Benjamin Franklin, were not only Masons, but also Rosicrucians, tying them to ancient mystery school networks. The United States was not just a nation founded on liberty, but on ritual liberty, the idea that mankind could rebuild Babel under hidden gods. I mean, it allowed for Christianity to flourish also, so that's a great thing. So now we have tares and wheats growing together universally everywhere. Albert Pike, a 33rd degree sovereign grand commander, allegedly wrote a letter to Giuseppe Mazzini in 1871 detailing a 3 World War plan. World War I, to destroy the czars and national monarchies. The Second World War, to establish Zionism and provoke Islamic tension. And 3, to cause mutual global exhaustion, ushering in Luciferian global governance. So while skeptics question the document's origin, it is eerily accurate in its predictions, and Pike's Luciferian statements, found in Morals and Dogma, warrant close examination. Read it prayerfully if you do. Freemasonry and global organizations, the United Nations building was funded and designed by high-degree Masons like Nelson Rockefeller. Its meditation room dedicated to the God of all religions, featuring a black magnetic altar stone with Luciferian geometry. How wonderful, huh? And then the World Bank, IMF, and Trilateral Commission all trace back to individuals with Masonic, Rosicrucian, or Theosophical affiliations. For example, John D. Rockefeller Jr., an advocate of eugenics and world governance, was deeply involved with both Masonic charities and occult societies. And then Mystery Babylon in Modern Dress. Revelation speaks of Mystery Babylon, a woman riding a beast, drunk with the blood of the saints. Her fingerprints are found in the obelisk in Washington, echoing Osiris, the Vatican's global spiderweb of obelisks and domes, the all-seeing eye on all of our currency, echoed in tech logos like Apple, Google, CBS, modern schooling systems founded on Masonic Enlightenment ideals, like Horace Mann and John Dewey. These are not mere symbols, they are ritual architecture anchoring spiritual power in physical places, and it's right in your face, eyes wide shut. So the final goal, controlled unity under a false light. Freemasonry promotes liberty, equality, fraternity, echoing Lucifer's counterfeit kingdom. Freedom without submission to Yahweh, right? The aim is synthesis of all religions, governments, and economies into one system, a new world order, a digital Tower of Babel, a return to Hermon with AI, gene editing, and quantum gods in place of idols. So what began as a rebellion in heaven became a tower in Shinar. What rose in Egypt, Babylon, and Greece now sits in Geneva, New York, and Silicon Valley. The Watcher's legacy lives in bylaws, bank codes, and biometric IDs. They no longer need to descend. They have disciples everywhere here that cooperate with them. So how do we know these claims are true? Well, in an age of lies wrapped in layers of false authority, the question isn't, is this a conspiracy? The real question is, well, who's behind it and why do they hide it so well? So let's address 5 areas I think you might be asking questions in from this section and back them up with some sources, right? Quotes and logic. So are we really saying Freemasons built America on occult ideas? Well, yes, but you don't have to take our word for it. George Washington laid the cornerstone of the U.S. Capitol on September 18th, 1793, using full Masonic ritual and regalia. It's in the Library of Congress. They have a digital copy of the invitation and ceremony details. You can read it for yourself. DC's layout, designed by Pierre L'Enfant and Masonic surveyors, forms Masonic shapes like the compass square and a pentagram right there in the streets. You can see it. Justin Fall and his brother did an entire program a while back on it, I think called The Belly of the Beast. You should check it out. The Great Seal of the U.S., designed by Freemasons and Rosicrucians, includes the all-seeing eye, which matches the Masonic eye of providence from degree rituals. You can find this info in things like Founding Fathers, Secret Societies by Robert Hieronymus, The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital by David Oveson, and just reading Masonic Lodge research archives. They actually let people go through some of them. You know. And you might ask, is that Pike letter about the 3 world wars real? Well, the famous Albert Pike letter to Giuseppe Mazzini in 1871 predicting 3 world wars is hotly debated, but here's what we do know. His letter existed in some form and was reportedly cataloged in the British Museum before World War II, though they later deny this. And whether it's authentic or not, the content eerily aligns with real events. Zionism versus Islam, World War III scenario. Is that not happening as we speak? I mean, isn't the Strait of Hormuz being shut down today? We thought, oh, we'll just go over there and destroy the nuclear facilities and everything will be great. It'll all be done. It'll be over. We can go home, pack up our lunch, have a beer, and sit in the tavern with the guys from Pilgrims Grey. Maybe go to the Watchtower later. But no, this isn't done yet. And then communism in World War II, and the exhaustion of nations and rise of global governance. Even if it's apocryphal, Pike's own writings are openly Luciferian, right? And Morals and Dogma, page 321. Lucifer, the light bearer. It is he who bears the light. I mean, you can see these sources too. Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. It's in the, believe it or not, it's in the Library of Congress archive. You can find it. And then Pawns in the Game by William Guy Carr. Great book. I think we might be going over that one too. And then any research by Dr. Stanley Monteth and Bill Cooper, if you know Bill Cooper. He's dead now, but he did a lot of great research in this area. And you wouldn't hurt for you to look him up and see what he has to say about it. And so another thing somebody might ask is, do Masons really influence world institutions like the UN or IMF? Well, yes. It's documented and traceable. The UN Meditation Room, funded by Hammarskjöld, includes a black altar stone and a layout described as a temple for all religions. Designers and funders of the UN complex include Nelson Rockefeller, a high-level Mason and globalist. Many top IMF, World Bank, and Trilateral Commission members have Masonic or Theosophical ties. You can find this out by reading Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley, Rule by Secrecy by Jim Mars, and just look up Rockefeller Foundation records, UNESCO, UN charter funding. You'll find it out. I know most people don't dig, but I've started tagging these books in the description of my video on YouTube, and I don't really have a way to do it on Spotify and so on, but if you just check out the YouTube page and subscribe, you can see that many of the books are tagged. And yes, I get a commission off it, but it doesn't change the price of the book. So it's a win-win. You get knowledge, I get support to keep the podcast going and help it to be further reaching. So some people think that Mystery Babylon and its claim is just a metaphor. But Revelation 17 describes Mystery Babylon as drunk with the blood of the saints, clothed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones, sitting on many waters. It really does match the Vatican and the Roman Catholic system. The colors do: wealth, martyrdom, history, the global banking system, which controls nations, waters, which equals peoples, and the New Age movement with its spiritual fornication, unity, rhetoric, and goddess worship. In Freemasonry, Mystery Babylon is echoed in the Whore of Babylon rituals of higher degree rites, especially found in Co-Masonry and OTO, which we mentioned earlier. Babylon's architecture and gods appear in Masonic temples in Washington, D.C. Some of this can be found in The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop and A Woman Rides the Beast by Dave Hunt. I don't agree necessarily with everything those guys wrote, but it's good to read other views on it, and you might find some things you'll agree with and some things you disagree with. but it'll definitely add to your mind's inventory of information on the subject. So, aren't these just symbols and I'm reading too much into them? Well, look, you may not agree, but symbols do carry spiritual authority and they are not decorative. As Albert Mackey, a respected 33-degree Masonic historian, wrote, quote, "Every Masonic lodge is a temple of religion, and its teachings are instruction in religion." These symbols anchor rituals to locations, just as in Israel's temple system. They act as spiritual legal permissions in the unseen realm, and they were passed down from the watchers to men in Enoch chapter 8, 3-5. So what appears harmless to the average person is encoded ritual to the initiate. And some sources for that, the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry by Albert Mackey. You could read 1 Enoch chapter 8, or Occult Theocracy by Lady Queensborough. So when people ask, well, where's the proof? I would just remind you that evil always leaves breadcrumbs, but only those who refuse the spell of Babylon will follow them back to the architects. So then what good is a system of global control, financial, political, and spiritual, if you can't enforce it, right? So the fallen ones didn't just build Mystery Babylon to influence world governments, they built it to protect their agents, silence the dissenters, and legally bless injustice. If you control the courtroom, you don't need to win the war. You can bankrupt your enemies, bury evidence, and bind the innocent while letting your brothers go free. And that brings us to the next layer in the architecture of the lodge, the place where justice is sold to the highest oath. So, you stand like this in court, heel to hollow, and the judge knows to favor you. That's a quote from them. So, Freemasonry's influence extends far beyond temples and lodges, or they wouldn't bother. It sits quietly behind gavels and badges. Police, judges, sheriffs, and attorneys have historically been among the most common professions found in blue lodges. In their extension, like the Fraternal Order of Police. So the oath of Freemasonry includes the promise to help, aid, and assist a fellow Mason in distress, even above your duty to law or state. This means a Mason in a courtroom can silently signal allegiance to the fraternity, triggering preferential treatment from judges or officers. This is the real meaning behind the phrase, a friend of the court. Heel to hollow refers to the Masonic courtroom stance, placing one foot at a specific angle behind the other, mimicking an initiation posture. Finger signs and handshakes can identify a brother in need of help or recognition. I think there's something from Proverbs 6, 13, and 14 on that subject if you want to look it up. Even body language in police stops or jail booking can secretly signal to a fellow Mason that you're one of them. I just looked it up, and it says a naughty person. I love it. A naughty person speaketh with his feet, he teacheth with his fingers, forwardness is in his heart. I don't think Solomon was describing clumsiness. He was describing ritual gestures, in my opinion. Some examples of this. Jack the Ripper, Masonic killings. Author Stephen Knight in Jack the Ripper, The Final Solution, proposed that the Ripper murders followed Masonic ritual executions, slashed throats, evisceration, mutilation of the left side. All key suspects, Sir William Gall, etc., were Masons. The police commissioner at the time, Sir Charles Warren, was the head of English Freemasonry, and what did he do? Shut down key leads on the case. And then we have Shriners in ritual abuse cover-ups. The Shriners, a high body within the Masonic order, have been implicated in sexual abuse scandals, including use of hospitals and secret chapters as fronts. Whistleblowers have described DAs, psychiatrists, and judges working together to discredit victims. Cases, quote-unquote, lost in paperwork, or charges dropped with no explanation, intimidation, and social ruin of families who dare to speak out. One case in Florida involved over 200 complaints against a known Masonic-affiliated judge. None were pursued. You can read some of this in Knight's Jack the Ripper, The Final Solution, which has survivors' testimonies in Bosra archives, and in Fritz Springmeier's documentation also. Remember Fritz Springmeier from our first thing? Yeah. And then financial fraud and predator protection. Many white-collar fraud rings, Ponzi schemes, and real estate scams are enabled by networks of Masons shielding each other in court. Cases involving embezzlement or elder abuse by Masons often go unprosecuted despite overwhelming evidence. Good old boy networks in rural America and high-level Masonic lawyers in cities create untouchable immunity. The widow is not protected, but the widow's son always is. See? I think my wife and Amanda and I even had to put up with possible attempts on our property when we were first building our house, where we had a guy, we bought our land for right around $90,000, 13 and a half, 14 acres. And we put fences on it. We put electricity on it. We put water on it. We improved the land, improved it by a considerable amount. The fences alone were $14,000, folks, to keep our horses in, right? And then water, hooking yourself up to city water at great distance, because our driveway is, several hundred yards long. And so all of that, and electricity, all of it built into the property now. And this guy who came out valued it at $80,000 for the land. And what he was trying to do was undercut it so that we would not be able to get our construction loan finalized, and we would fall roughly $30,000 short. But to their chagrin, we came up with the money. The plan would have been to sell, we would, have defaulted on it. They would take it over and buy it dirt cheap from the bank. And somebody there at the bank who's one of their members would give it to them and make sure they're the ones that got it. The guy, whatever, you get the idea. And so they get it, and then they can either sell it or live in it. It doesn't matter. It's just part of their brotherhood, right? For the betterment of the brotherhood, right? I'm just a scumbag who doesn't belong to it, right? Teenage dirtbag. So this is not justice. This is ritual law masquerading as jurisprudence. The scales of Lady Justice have been tipped by oath sworn in secret. The courtroom itself becomes their lodge. And if you don't know the code, you don't get the mercy. Mystery Babylon isn't just a religion or a city. It's a global infrastructure, is what I'm telling you. And its courtrooms run on loyalty to the brotherhood, not the law. The Grigori weren't just teachers of weapons and sorcery. They taught legalism, a shadow system to replace God's justice with counterfeit authority. In the days of Noah, the earth was filled with violence. In our day, it is filled with false justice and hidden by a handshake. So they rise by oath, not by merit. They ascend by ritual, not by righteousness. The crowned brotherhood of today is not random. It is descended, initiated, and groomed. From the days of Cain through Nimrod, pharaohs, emperors, and modern presidents, the bloodline of rebellion has built, ruled, and sacrificed. And this is our last section, by the way. At least 17 U.S. presidents were definite verified Masons, including George Washington, 33 degree posthumously, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, Franklin D. Roosevelt, who placed the eye of Providence on the dollar, Harry Truman, who dropped the atomic bomb and founded our wonderful CIA. or OSS, I guess, initially. I don't know. Many others were connected through Skull and Bones, Bohemian Grove, or other secret orders. There's plenty of them, right? They didn't just hold office, they carried ancient assignments, acting as stewards of that hidden kingdom. Now, few know that Mormonism's temple ceremonies were plagiarized directly from York Rite Freemasonry. Joseph Smith became a master mason in Nuevo, Illinois in 1842. Immediately afterward, he introduced Masonic penalties, handshakes, tokens, and endowments into the LDS temple rites. His exposure of Masonic secrets paired with rising political power led to his assassination by a Masonic-linked mob, just as William Morgan had been murdered for writing illustrations of Freemasonry in 1826. So the Temple of Mormonism is a temple of repackaged ritual, built not on scripture, but on the grimoire of the craft. Cecil McGavin writes a book called Mormonism and Masonry, and you can read it, and it'll blow your mind. And it's even, the funny thing is, it's even in Masonry archives, the Grand Lodge of Illinois, to be specific. Yep. When Adam Weishaupt founded the Bavarian Illuminati on May 1st, 1776, Beltane, anyone? His stated goal was clear: to infiltrate and subvert Freemasonry, using it to destroy Christianity and monarchies. Well, he succeeded. The highest degrees of Scottish Rite Freemasonry were modified to include Illuminist Gnostic doctrine. Weishaupt's principles lived on in the United Nations, world government, the World Bank or IMF, world finance, and the WEF and WHO, global management of health and crisis and pharmakia. Better known as witchcraft and sorcery in Scripture. The lodge became the Illuminati's cathedral, a cathedral without walls. You can find much of that information in a book written in 1798 called Proofs of a Conspiracy by John Robeson. And then the Order of the Eastern Star, the feminine Baphomet, right? So while most focus on male-dominated Masonry, its female counterpart, the Order of the Eastern Star, is far more than ceremonial. Its inverted pentagram symbol pointing downward with a goat's head geometry is the exact reversal of divine order. It claims to honor biblical women like Ruth and Esther, but instead it uses their names as veils, placing a counterfeit goddess in their place. It is Baphomet's feminine polarity, bridging the gap between male-female spiritual energies, opening doors for demonic contact. Witches, Luciferians, and even New Age priestesses have written of the Eastern Star's ritual astral impact. The Eastern Star is the spiritual consort of the Antichrist system, a temple prostitute dressed in religious garb. But don't take my word for it. You can read it in Hidden Secrets of the Eastern Star from Masonic Ritual Manuals by Kathy Burns. So at the top of the pyramid sits not an ideology, but a man. Freemasonry's highest rites allude to a coming architect, one who will rule a perfect temple, unite mankind, and restore order out of chaos. To them, this is the rebuilding of what was lost at Babel, a return to the divine light. But doesn't Scripture reveal the truth? Right? He will oppose and exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped. 2 Thessalonians 2:4. This throne is being built in stages. The financial system is his purse. The Temple Mount will be his throne. The digital grid, his surveillance. And the apostate church is his prophet. Or prophets. So this is the seed line of the serpent, building its final system in full view, wearing robes, badges, and crosses. But they are still wolves. The seed of Cain and the sons of the serpent walk unchallenged through boardrooms, courtrooms, and pulpits because nobody knows who they are, except one another. But their financial structure will fall, for no tower can reach heaven that is built on rebellion. And so they rise, crowned not by justice, but by blood pacts and whispered names. In the word of the gray wanderer, I saw the crowns glint with stars inverted, and the scrolls beneath them bound in oath. They sit upon thrones not carved from stone, but from ancient grievance and forgotten altars. Yet the tower leans, and the light above it turns away. But every tower, built by oath-bound hands, must one day crown a king. The bloodline of the builders, those who rose by secrecy, who whispered in thrones and pulpits, didn't rise for mere power. They rose to prepare a structure, to forge a system, and to summon a ruler whose shadow stretches back to Eden and whose rebellion began before man was made. The rituals, the architecture, the alliances, they're a scaffolding for the final empire, not just global but spiritual, and not just political but cosmic. And what follows is not conspiracy. It's the blueprint. As above, so below. The end game of the craft begins. The key theme of that, the Freemasonic system, isn't just about symbols, rituals, or fraternal bonds. It is a spiritual scaffolding designed to host the final global empire of the Antichrist, a digital Babylon built on Watcher knowledge, blood sacrifice, and cosmic rebellion. And while most Masons remain completely unaware of this, the upper degrees reveal the true light of the Lodge, and it is not the light of Christ. 33-degree initiates are taught that Lucifer is the true bearer of divine wisdom, a Prometheus figure, the light giver unjustly maligned by tyrannical religion. Pike writes in Morals and Dogma, yes, Lucifer is God, and the true and pure philosophical religion is the belief in Lucifer, the equal of Adonai. The illumination mimics the forbidden knowledge of Eden, Genesis 3, rebranded as enlightenment. One of the Masonry's great rituals is the legend of Hiram Abif, the builders of Solomon's temple, who is killed and raised again. This reenactment is a Luciferian counterfeit of resurrection, and the temple they seek to rebuild is not for the God of Israel, but for the one who will sit in the temple of God, claiming to be God in 2 Thessalonians 2:4. Masonic support for Zionism, the Sanhedrin, and rebuilding the third temple is not about prophecy. It's about preparing a throne for their light bearer. It's about prophecy to us, but I'm saying to them. So, Freemasonry was always about building, and in the 21st century, they've moved from bricks to code. Tech elites, many trained in esoterica, now build quantum systems, brain-machine interfaces, and AI oracles that mirror ancient Watcher miracles. The goal? Post-human unity under a beast system, digital currency, global biometric ID, right? The UN's ID 2020. AI judges, AI prophets, AI gods. This is not sci-fi, it's Nephilim tech rebooted. Daniel 2:43, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. Right? The original sin of the Grigori was not just lust, it was intervention. Teaching forbidden sciences, mixing of species, exalting the created over the creator, and then rebuilding it in their image, like we said previously. Today's Freemasonic aligned powers repeat this sin through things like CRISPR, gene editing, designer children, kind of like a Nephilim reboot, synthetic wombs, and biospiritual cloning. Elon Musk's Neuralink, which mirrors the Watcher tech described in 1st Enoch, dividing spirit, soul, and body with a false upgrade. You can read about some of this in the Military Occult Complex from Tom Horn and Steve Quayle, if you know who they are. I would suggest reading that. Freemasonry helped erect the spiritual and structural framework for the beast system and now awaits its false messiah. Many believe this will be a hybrid being, both human and fallen, who fulfills Masonic prophecy from Manly P. Hall's The Secret Destiny of America. Also fulfills the Islamic Mahdi expectations and New Age Ascended Master predictions. The temple will be his throne. The AI will be his prophet. And the world will worship the image of the beast just like they worship the golden calf. He will have power to give life unto the image, right? So the builders have built. The temple is digital. The priesthood is synthetic. The God is artificial. But the spirit behind it all is as old as Eden and as cursed as Hermon. We are not merely watching world events. We are watching the Watchers. Watching the Watchers. Final system being born. And some final words from the Grey Wanderer, who states, "And I saw their towers rise again, not of stone, but of signal, not of faith, but of flesh and flame. The old masons, cloaked in pixels and protocol, called down fire from the sky, and they said, 'This is the light of man.' But I saw the shadow behind it, the same eyes that watched from Hermon, now blinking in satellites and servers, and I heard a voice from the wilderness say, 'Come out of her, my people.'" And so we come to the edge of another night's reckoning. We're at the end of this. We've walked the corridors of temples not made with stone. We've seen the hands behind the thrones, the eyes above the pyramid, and the whispers that still echo from Hermon to the hill of Zion. The builders have done their work, but so must we, right? This isn't just history, it's prophecy unfolding, and if you feel the pull, the stirring in your spirit, then maybe, just maybe, you too were born for such a time as this that you're in. And we're not funded by think tanks here or cathedral crowns. Here at Pilgrims Grey Chronicles, we are stewards of what little we have. We're just wanderers with a map and a lamp. So if this journey has opened your eyes, share the show, like, comment, carry it like a torch into the shadowed halls of the algorithm, right? Let others know that the war is not over and the watchmen are still speaking. We can be your voice here, since you don't have a podcast. And you can also support our podcast and its message by checking out our Pilgrims Grey merchandise or grabbing the books and resources that we tag in the shows, tools for those who wish to go deeper, to test all things and be a good Berean, and to study to show themselves approved, right? I don't want you to take things just on my word. I give my sources, but you should read and make sure I'm doing it right? So until next time, fellow wayfarers, keep your lamps trimmed, stay on the watchtower, and remember, the final tower is being built, but the true king is coming. And with that, have a great work week.
Hey! Gather round, ye travelers, lend me your ear. A tale of